Get ready to be inspired by the great things happening in rural education. The Rural Scoop will bring you new ideas and innovative solutions. We'll dive into education issues and we'll highlight what's working in your rural communities. You'll hear from a variety of educators, administrators, professionals, and others who will provide relevant and engaging content in each episode. And now, serving up the scoop, here's your host, Dr. Melissa Sadorf.
Some leaders inherit a playbook, but that's not our guest today. Cory Kulig wrote a new one in a rural place. In western Wisconsin, he's led work that moved two small districts, Whitehall and Elvestrom, from successful but traditional to truly future-ready. What stands out isn't the programs, it's the judgment calls behind them. How he framed urgency without losing people, how he built teaching and teacher confidence for real competency-based learning, and how he stitched together community partnerships that actually last. So today we're going to trace the leadership moves beneath the headlines about how Cory translated big forces like automation and AI into local course designs, how he used schedules and logistics as quiet superpowers, and how some of the initiatives that he's put in place like Liftoffs or the Whitehall Regional Emerging Technology Lab and Cardinal Manufacturing have really become vehicles for student ownership rather than ends in themselves. So if you care about what it looks like to lead rural change in a rural district with making sure that your dollars are being spent wisely and you're keeping those deep relationships in place, this is your episode. So let's get into it. Cory, thanks for joining me today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Well, I want to get started with your story, not necessarily the program. So before we talk about the models that you're working on in your districts, can you tell us your path? What led you from your starting out in this career to where you are now? And then as you walk through that, what decisions or risks and lessons have really shaped you as a leader?
Yeah, so this is my 24th year in education, and I spent 6 years in the classroom, which isn't a ton relative to what a lot of people do. I spent 10 years as principal, and now this is my 8th year as superintendent. Throughout that time, I've always been willing to take risks because I know that you have to take risks in order to see change. And, we talk about things and we look at the things we have in place, and we look at how can we do things better for our students. And the beauty of working in a small school district is you're able to have those personal conversations. You're able to navigate and change course relatively quickly. And we know our students. So we know the students we have, and we know what their needs are. We know what their passions are. So I think we have a much better feel as to how we make some of those changes. And then we just look at, what we're currently doing, always continually auditing what we're doing, continually looking at the things that we do on a daily basis, and can we do better? And continually asking ourselves, how do we do better for our students? How do we do better so that they can leave our rural community or stay in a rural community, whatever they choose, and be successful in life?
Was there a moment that you can think back to when you knew that incremental tweaks just weren't enough? And what did you do first that actually started showing results?
Well, just looking at the changing landscape of public education and then how that trickles down to a rural perspective, it's pretty obvious, at least it was to me. And I know that some others are still navigating through that, but it was obvious to me that we needed to make some changes. We needed to do things differently. And really for me, one of the things when we started talking about our movement with personalized learning and durable skills and competencies and things like that is just looking at our current day, is walking through the halls, looking into the eyes of our students and realizing, when it comes to hiring teachers, oftentimes we get teachers that haven't found a job elsewhere. And a lot of times we were scrambling to fill positions. And I looked at what are we going to do in 2 years, in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years? So how do we get ahead of that? And, I use the word teacher proof, but it's not meant to be a negative term. It's for the benefit of kids. So if we are unable to find a teacher to lead that class, are we in a position to navigate to a platform and utilize the resources that we have so that kids can still be successful? So that was really my motivation, was looking at how things were changing post-COVID I mean, we all went through the COVID phase, and post-COVID, the realization that we had to do things differently from a structural perspective. We had to change the way we are delivering instruction from a teacher-led model to a student-controlled, student-led, where they feel empowered and engaged to be part of their learning.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Did you have people that challenged your thinking early on about that? And if you did, how did you change your approach with those people that were, you don't want to say resistors because that sounds negative, but maybe not as bought in?
Well, there was people that challenged early, often, and still. I mean, there's challenges every day because it is a monumental mind shift from what people know. And, using the term unlearning is we have to unlearn things that we come to know for 10, 20, 30 plus years in some cases. And that's a really difficult thing to do. And I respect the fact that that's what people know. I think my job is to paint the picture and show a different way of doing things so that they can make the realizations that, for kids that are in second grade now, that have 10 more years, what's the world going to be in 10 years? We keep looking at things from the perspective of where we're at right now, and with the rate of change and how rapid the emerging technologies are coming out and how different the world is now than it was 10 years ago. I think we have to always continually look forward. So those, we call them resistors. I call them challenges, and people should challenge, because if I'm not thinking on their correct path, that helps make solid decisions is to think about things and challenge the way we do things. So I don't see those as conversations that are annoying to me or anything like that. I think they're a necessary part of any change model.
Good point. Can you point to a concrete student or community outcome that you're most proud of? What made and maybe what made that possible?
Well, we've seen a lot of success with our card manufacturing. That has been something that's been going on for quite some time. And as we move forward with that, the changes and just having students be in charge of their learning, seeing the confidence that grows from a student that not only learns something, but then takes what they have learned and then applies it. And doing so with very little supervision, with very little guidance. I think that's what builds confidence in students, that they can take a task that there is no manual, that there are no guidelines, there are no steps to follow, and figure it out. And through that process, we know failure comes, but failure just is an opportunity for you to readjust, for you to look at things from a different perspective, for you to collaborate with your peers so that you can come to a better solution, and then try build a prototype, build this, build that, test it. And it may not be what you want, but then through that process, I think is really, one of the most important things. If there's one thing I give to all students is the confidence in themselves. And they just don't gain that by learning out of a textbook. Do it by learning and applying what you've learned. And I've seen that occur so many times throughout the years. And that's truly when the light bulb goes off for that student, because the next task that they are challenged with, they are in a better place to take on that new challenge.
Yeah, good point. So Cory, obviously you lead in a rural context where things like staffing concerns or long bus rides or tight budgets, although a plus is close-knit communities. Can you talk a little bit about how that's kind of shaped your leadership playbook, how you've approached these changes, knowing that there are just some things you have to think about as a rural leader?
Yeah, I mean, things are always different from a rural perspective, but you have teachers wearing many hats. And I think that's probably the biggest thing is people that are extended already, that teach multiple classes, have multiple preps, finding the time to give them the information that they need to enter this new way of doing things with an informed perspective. And just finding the time, like anything else, you hear that in education, we don't have the time. Well, I challenge that by saying, what are we currently doing that we no longer need to do or should not be doing? How do we replace the current time we have with things that are more fitted to a futuristic global perspective type of learning environment? So that is probably the most difficult thing. It's just getting enough people together. I mean, once we get together, once we have those devoted times to learn, grow together, we see amazing things happen. People's minds shifts change, they understand, they gain understanding, they try the emerging technologies, they utilize them, they find ways to embed them within their classroom. But, like anything else, it's a process, and I have to respect the fact that people have personal lives, they have families, and from a rural perspective, it just seems like we're wearing so many hats that often becomes a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Can you talk about when a constraint that you've had to deal with really became an unexpected advantage for you?
Well, I think shared staffing was one of the things, having teachers teach middle school and high school. And did some piloting with the personalized learning approach using some of the AI platforms. And just how does that translate from a middle school perspective to a high school perspective? How do we get the elementary teachers on board with, a scope and sequence so that we can, do this in a math platform from elementary through middle, right through high school. So I think that was one of the things that has been a challenge, is looking at when kids are advancing at a greater pace, what do we do with them next? We don't have another teacher that they can go to. You are the teacher for middle school and high school. So you are in that classroom. So advancement, just sending them to a new classroom, learning new concept, isn't something that we have the luxury to do.
Yeah. One of the things that leaders are often tasked with especially when they're rolling out a new initiative, is to sell what that thing is. What was the messaging that you used with both your staff and the community that worked? And then were there any early messages that you said to yourself, I'm not going to do that again?
Well, I try very hard to make it not look like a sales pitch, because I'm not trying to sell. I'm trying to educate them as to what I've learned. I've had the opportunity to travel, to listen to people, and to go to conferences and things like that. Not every teacher has that opportunity. So understanding that they don't have the same level of knowledge or expertise or just exposure to those different things, I had to respect that. But, it's just understanding the why, getting the why out there. Why are we even thinking about this? We feel like things are going really well for us, but are they really well in today's society? Looking ahead to what's next, what's coming next, and pivoting and navigating through those future challenges. So I think, I tried very hard not to come at it from a sales perspective. Oftentimes that's what we have to do, both through our school boards, to our communities, to our teachers, and sometimes to the students. So I just engage in conversations. What questions do you have? Because the more I put emails out there, the more we talk about it in a in-service type setting, it doesn't always resonate with everyone else. So a lot of times you have to follow that up with individualized conversations and find out what people's hangups are, and then trying to dispel some of those myths of what they think might be happening versus what we actually want to happen.
Yeah. Before we go further, let's dive into the types of programming that you actually shifted toward, and walk us through the different things that you've implemented, what it looks like on the ground, and if you could talk too about, the shift from actual competency and applied learning. Those things are based on a change in teacher practice or how you assess. What the student day looks like. Those are all things to take into consideration as you're standing up the programming. But talk us through what it is you've done, and then what looks different as a result of those initiatives.
So I feel like we're still in our infancy stages. I mean, we're marking about the 1-year anniversary of our shift. So I don't feel like we certainly don't have it all figured out. I'm the first to admit that. But the things that we've been able to accomplish and really the past 12 months have been remarkable, starting with our pilot. We started that in our elementary, 4th, 5th grade, up on through middle school with math. We went to a personalized learning platform. We used Khan Academy last year. This year, we're using Alex Math. And it creates an atmosphere where students can learn at their own pace. The teacher becomes the facilitator, not someone that's standing in front of the classroom delivering content, where students are working towards compliance, getting this assignment completed so that they can have free time. Kids are constantly being challenged. And I think where I'm really seeing the most shift right now is some of our elementary classrooms looking at how do we do projects? How do we apply this learning? So they're learning the concepts, and then we're embedding emerging technologies. We have Indy cars where the kids are using those. We have Lego science kits. We have, chomp saws, things like that, where kids can then build what they've been learning about, or have an opportunity to do some hands-on type things. So that's when we talk about what the future focus is. We've got some really good things, pockets of really good things. Now it's building that one model classroom and then having it kind of, expand from there, from one first grade classroom to all first grade classrooms, and then into second, third grade. But it's really hard to make substantial change as a whole scale. So what I've really focused on, done the overarching with our competencies, and we want kids to have durable skills. We want them to be competent in multiple areas. Adaptability is probably arguably the number one skill that students will have to have as they enter the workforce and enter the world into the future, because things are changing so quickly. So we kind of use those as our overarching themes, is how do we teach kids to be adaptable? How do we teach kids to be collaborative? And those are the things that I've seen is kids, they learn best from their peers, not from a teacher standing in front of the classroom. So the most remarkable things that I've seen so far have been in those classrooms where students are working through student over to the left or right of them as they're out of their desk doing vertical learning at the board or any space we have, and going through that, working through that together and helping peers. They're all at different levels of knowledge or pace, and they just help each other. And that is really the most remarkable thing. And the teacher and I stand there and just look at each other and say, this is what we want. They don't have to come to the teacher. They don't feel bogged down. Peers, without prompting, without any guidance, have just stepped in to help, because that is what they want. They want everybody to be successful.
As a result of that, I would imagine that feedback looks different. The feedback they get from the teacher, and grading probably looks different too. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like for you now?
Yeah, we're working hard to adopt the competencies, finding ways to get them. I mean, that's our focus right now. We're still going to, pay attention to the standards, and we're going to embed those standards within the competencies, and really getting away from chasing points, chasing grades. It's about the acquisition of knowledge, and it's about the ability to do things, not only learn things, but to be able to teach others how to do it, the ability to work through things that aren't from a manual and aren't part of the curriculum. And as they work forward through their learning journey, they're able to have those opportunities to not only highlight their work, showcase their work, talk about their work, but, really explore. I mean, that is where the power is, for allowing time, creating time for students to explore. So we're going to be doing a lot more work for the remainder of this year and into next year, with the hopes that we can be in a much better place to start the 26-27 school year than we are right now. And, but that's going to require a lot of work, both the rest of this year and through the summer.
Yeah. It takes a lot of teacher effort to do that kind of shift in how you structure lessons and content. And part of your job as a leader, I'm sure, is to build their confidence and capacity. So can you talk about how you're supporting your educators to take those bigger instructional risks without burning out? And what kind of things you've put in place as far as supports, like professional development or coaching, those kinds of things?
Yeah, we've provided professional development through LiftOffs, an opportunity for teachers to both, dating back to last summer. We have people come in from CUSA 4 and LiftOffs that provide that guidance, because people will get stuck, and I think the most important thing from my perspective was letting teachers know that it's okay to fail. They have a safe, we're working through this, we're learning, we're building the plane as we're flying it, so to speak. So we will hit roadblocks. There will be lessons that didn't go the way you think they should have went, but it's okay. It's safe. Because I truly, firmly believe that even with the change, students will be further ahead in this model than they would have in a traditional model. I know they will. So even those perceived failures, because teachers they want to do the best they can possibly do. It's uncomfortable for them. They're teaching in a manner that they've never been trained or taught necessarily to teach in. So they are acquiring the knowledge. They're learning at a more rapid pace than students are. And as uncomfortable as that is, my job as a leader is to let them know that we're in this together, that we're committed to this. And, one of the best things, we had a news station here last year doing an interview about our progress and things like that. And I just had a little debriefing session with teachers. And I said, so do you like what we're doing? Or would you prefer we were with our old traditional way of teaching? And in unison, all that were there said, oh no, this is good. We're keeping this. We just have to figure it all out. So that was reassuring to me, knowing that, the people that are directly working with students that have, sometimes 3 decades of experience at various levels in special education, look at me and say, no, this is good. We are going to continue with this, and we're just going to get better at it. So those are my reaffirming moments.
Did you have to stop doing anything to make room for what you're doing now?
We haven't really stopped doing anything. We've just shortened the amount of time that we spend on things because we're able to get through things quicker. And that's part of the discussion we're having right now as we build the schedule for the upcoming school year is how do we build in time? How do we build in time, into our exploratory so that students have committed time to go into the makerspace area, to go and to do STEM related type things intentionally, not as part of an add-on of any class or after school club. How do we embed those things into the school day? And it comes to the question, where do we find time? What do we not do? Well, let's readjust our schedule, look at what we do. And we're able to do that. And from the elementary perspective, if we had an hour for math and ELA with a 30-minute intervention / enrichment period, that's 90 minutes. We don't need 90 minutes. I mean, with a personalized learning approach, kids are getting it in a fraction of the time, which is freeing up that time to then work with some of the IndyCars, emerging technology, whatever it might be, so that they can explore and, they're learning about diameter and circumference. They can use these things, build something, and then explain and see their finished product and explain diameter, circumference, whatever it might be that they're learning in those math classes. So that's ongoing, but I like what we've done to this point.
So I want to shift gears a little bit, Cory, and talk about we've been talking about inside the classroom. I want to go outside the school building because you've brought employers and community partners to the table in this work. So what was it that you did to start those conversations? And then how have you been able to sustain those relationships over time?
Well, we have to ask the people that are the employers because they know what they need for employees in the future. So listening to them, asking those questions, getting data. I know CISA4 did a comprehensive study with area businesses and, learning what they want. They want people that can collaborate, that can have a strong work ethic, all the soft skills. That's one of the things that has been a staple of our targeted manufacturing is soft skills. We'll learn the necessary components of, you learn the basics of the manual mills and the lathes and things like that, but understanding how to work with people, how to talk with people, how to greet people, showing up on time, all of those things, they have to be ingrained as part of that process. And so we've spent time with that. That's what we've heard from our employers for the longest time is we want people that are willing to work with each other, that will show up consistently, that will adapt to their changing environments, that don't need to have their hands held, that they have the ability to be self-driven. I mean, those are all things that really we can talk about, but until they put them in practice, that's really where the power comes from.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything that you've learned along the way in working with your partners that might be a pitfall that you would warn your peers about when they're first engaging industry partners like the work that you've done?
Well, I think one of the things we have to be aware of is that your local employers might not be looking at things from a global perspective. And that's not against them. If they're a small regional company or local company, they're not thinking from a global perspective. And I think you have to have that awareness of the global perspective of how things are what's happening in other countries, what we need to do to stay relevant in U.S. manufacturing, for example. So as much as we listen to our local employers and we take their input, we also have to understand that that's not the whole story. That's their version of a story. So we also have to look at things from a bigger lens as well, because our kids may want to move outside of our local area, and some of them do. We would like all of them to stay, obviously, but they don't always do that. So wherever they move to, or if they have a job, an international type job, how are we preparing them to be successful in those roles?
So I want to talk about technology as an amplifier, not necessarily a driver. So can you talk a little bit about how you choose and sequence tools, including AI, so that they really amplify teacher impact and local goals rather than dictate them, which I know a lot of teachers are concerned about?
Yeah, AI is very controversial in how it applies into a school setting. And we don't talk about AI a lot. We have our team, we look at things, we vet different programs, platforms, and we look at them, how would they apply to our school and our school district, and how will they help our students? How will they make the experience for the student a more engaging experience? We're really talking about engagement. So when we talk about AI and the different chatbots and things like that, we obviously have to be very careful, because, we certainly don't want to open the floodgates to that. But we also have to open our minds. This is what kids are this is the world they will live in. So we have to expose them. I think we're doing them a disservice by not exposing them to that environment. So, doing the work on our end, vetting the different platforms, doing a test run, piloting these platforms, looking at how they apply it. Are they doing what we thought they would do? And be willing to adjust. We're not tied to any one platform. We're not tied to anything in that respect. We have to look at how this provides the best opportunity for our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. What master schedule or transportation tweaks really were able to unlock more access to advanced coursework or CTE or work-based learning? What did you have to do to ensure that those things were able to fit within the day? Because you said that you actually were able to get more time for those things. Can you talk us through what that actually looked like?
Yeah, when a student is able to go through, let's say a math course, some students, you have students at all levels when it comes to proficiency and things like that. So, if we have a kid that's able to go through a 36-week course and to mastery in 8 weeks, shame on us for keeping them hostage, I always say, in that classroom for 28 more weeks, waiting for others to go along their educational journey. I think we have to make more efficient use of their time. There's a reason why a student will become disengaged when they know the content, but they're only able to go at a level that are at a speed at which our pace where the rest of the class is. So we have to be able to, provide the next opportunity to keep them engaged within that journey. So in doing so, students that, our higher level students are going to get through coursework quicker. So, opportunities for youth apprenticeship, opportunities for doing community-based projects, to get out on the job sites, learning about different careers and things like that. So, from a middle school perspective, we tweaked our schedule a little bit. So it's providing a 44-minute time for STEM related. So students can, take what was typically part of that math ELA time. We're dialing that back a little bit because we feel like we can get through those concepts quicker, but they're also going to be using the concepts that they're learning in English language arts and math and some of the things that they're doing with emerging technology. So we feel like that's a way for them to apply what they've learned in a shorter amount of time. So those are a couple of things that we've done to this point.
Yeah, that's great. And Cory, I want to follow up on that because there's sometimes friction between accountability and at the state level and what you're trying to do locally. So can you talk a little bit about where state accountability requirements may have clashed with what you're doing that is good for kids, or have you been able to ensure that those two things exist side by side peacefully?
Well, when we first started this, I said, we're going to do this unapologetically because I felt strong enough that we needed to make some changes. A structural change in public education needed to occur. And what better place than to do that from a rural perspective? We're able to navigate a little bit more quickly, steer the ship a little bit quicker than can with a bigger organization. We're keeping all the state standards at the forefront of our work. We're ensuring that they're being met, but we're doing so in a way that meets them differently. I mean, the state standards don't tell you that you need to do this A, B, C, D. It's just as by the end of 8th grade, well, if we're able to do that in a much more engaging manner, students are working and they don't even know they're working. They think they're having fun doing these things, but they're really learning concepts in a different manner. So, but we can't sit and wait for big systems to change in order for us to do this. If we're doing this, somebody has to step out in front of this. We're not going rogue. We're doing things calculated, but we're also not going to be held back by compliance. That compliance can oftentimes deter any meaningful movement or progress or success. So, we keep everything in our minds and we make sure that we're meeting those standards. But, for us, it's all about how do we get competent individuals? How do we get them durable skills so that they can, navigate from one subject area or one task to another with fluidity and confidence and adaptability and, to be able to collaborate. So those are some of the things that we're doing, but it's, like I said, it's a work in progress. And as we finalize our competency work, we will make sure that every standard is met. We're just going to do it differently.
That's great. Now, Cory, one of the things that that you have to think about when you're making this kind of large scale change is how it's going to impact your culture at your school site. So, and one of the things that culture is founded upon is trust. So can you talk about the leadership behaviors that built trust with your staff and how you were able to make sure that that culture of high expectations, different expectations, was being met without sacrificing any of the culture that I know you've built? Because you can't do this work without a positive culture in place.
Yeah, culture is everything. From that perspective, going back to the whole us unveiling what we're thinking about doing, at the time I felt like an imposter because I didn't even know, but I felt strongly enough about it. And I felt strongly enough that the reasons behind why this change needed to be done were important enough that we needed to explore them. And as we did, we just had conversations and, trust, it takes a long time. If your staff doesn't trust you going into this, they're very unlikely to jump on and trust you going into a structural change type process like this. So the trust has to be established well ahead of time. And, talking about the why, talking about the process, talking about how we can support, giving them the freedom to try new things, to do things differently, to not be afraid of failure. All of those things just are those things that people have to feel. And once they feel that, they're still going to question. There's still going to be, questions that arise. There's still going to be things that occur where they will say, oh, yep, didn't work like we thought it would. And yes, okay, now let's find a better way. But we're not going backwards. We're always going forward. And I think that mentality has to be established early, and then provide as much professional development as possible and listen to what they're doing, celebrate the successes because there are many of them. We don't know them all. We don't think of them as successes because they're just part of what we do. But when they occur, let them know there are great things happening, and it's all because of your guidance, the facilitation that you're doing, and your open-mindedness. And if we want students to take the unknown and come up with solutions and whatever, what better way to model that than to have the teachers work from that same lens? If the students see the teacher struggling, having productive struggle through something, learning as they're going, that's being modeled for them. So they're more likely to participate in that same journey.
Yeah, good point. What about with your parents and the community at large? What kinds of things did you do to maintain trust there that leaders that are listening into this episode might want to take back to their own school buildings?
I mean, we did. We informed parents of what we were planning to do, some of the reasons behind what we're going to do, and with our math pilot last year. But then just having the teachers communicate that, constant communication from the teachers, but the best communication can come from the students. When those students go home and say, I like this is more fun, it's more engaging, I'm learning more, this is a lot better than sitting at a desk. That's the best advertising you can get right there, is when students go home and talk to their parents. And I'm not naive enough to think that 100% of students liked it, because there are plenty of type A personalities that tell me what I need to do, A, B, C, D, and I'll do it. I'll make sure I get all of it done. Just tell me. And that's not the model we're currently working in. And so from that perspective, we have an amazing community. We have amazing staff that the connection is very strong. So when you have that connection, when people know you, not only as a teacher, but at a personal level, you have kids that are in the same grade that you're friends with. I think it's easier from that perspective because they know each other. They know that they're in it for the right reasons. They have been in the community. They are pillars in the community, and they place their trust in the process. And it's been really good from that perspective.
So all of what you're doing takes budget choices, and most rural systems, actually most systems anywhere right now, quite frankly, are working with limited resources, right? So can you talk a little bit, Cory, about how the budget choices that you made have really delivered the biggest learning return, and you've been able to ensure that? Because the investment might look risky, but obviously for your system, it's paying off.
Yeah, I mean, there's not new funds available that are readily available. So you have to look at how you spend your money. Similar to your time, you have to look at how you spend your time. Well, how do we spend our money? What are the things that we're doing to spend our money? Do they fit into this model? And I think that's one of the things with vision. When you have a vision, you have to ask, does this expenditure play into our future vision? Does it play into what we're trying to do? And if it doesn't, you have to ask yourself, why are we continuing to do it? So, we stopped doing some things that were, down a different path, and we reallocated those funds. But we've been pretty wise about, not overextending ourselves to any particular platform or piece of emerging technology. We've been very careful with that. We've had private sponsorships for our professional development and things like that. So the investment to this point has been very, very minimal, I would say, from a total budget standpoint, because we want to test, we want to trial things, we want to see if this is something that would be applicable to all grade levels that are elementary, or if it's something that not the intended outcome that we expected, then we wouldn't purchase that. So I didn't go out and buy 5 grade levels of classroom sets for all 3 sections and then see what happens. We did so with 1 or 2 classrooms, and then we realized this was good. Then we rolled it out to made it available to all of our elementary classrooms, and then provided some professional development in that respect.
So when you look at the impact of the programming that you're putting in place, talk to us a little bit about the evidence that convinces you that it's working beyond just the anecdotes that students like learning that way, or beyond test scores that they might be getting on the state test. What moves the needle for you?
Well, obviously data is everything. I mean, data it's not everything. It provides you a good indicator of some things. We've Liftoffs has partnered with the American Institute of Research to follow and track our data and provide some reports on that. So we've got a great partnership there. And one of the things we're doing is talking to our teachers, looking at our test scores. Obviously, data takes time to develop. You can't develop data in a matter of months. It's over the course of years. But talking to our students, we had liftoffs crew come in here, and they met with every student individually, got their experience, got their perspective. So not only just looking at data, it's listening to our students and then interviewing teachers. What are you seeing? What differences are you seeing in the capacity of children in your classroom as a result of this work? So that's what we focused on early, because we knew the data would take time to collect and really have some validity.
In these initial data points that you're generating, any surprising outcomes that you didn't necessarily plan for?
Well, I think seeing kids that are highly capable, the kids that traditionally school is easy for them. They can go through a compliance-based school setting and get straight A's, but are they really developing? Are they meeting their potential? And that was a big thing for me, is seeing, from the gifted and talented side, or students that are, higher end of the spectrum in terms of their capabilities, giving them the opportunity to advance quicker gives them something to be engaged for. So that's one of the things that has been probably the most satisfying for me, is seeing those kids that were typically bored in school. And I hear that from my own kids. I'm bored. Traditional model, not being bored, being challenged, seeing productive struggle, because if things come easy for you, you can do very minimal in a traditional based school system and get straight A's, and your parents are happy, the teachers are happy with you, but you're not having fun. You're not engaged. It's boring. It's tedious. And that's the things that we're trying to eliminate. We want all kids to reach their full potential.
So, Cory, if a rural superintendent heard this episode and they were excited about stepping into the spaces that you are filling right now, what would be the first things that you'd tell them to take into account or to do in the next 30 or 60 days?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to have a plan. I mean, obviously, worked for us working with the liftoffs team at CESA 4 was huge, because we had people devoted. That is their job. They devote their time. As a superintendent, I'm busy doing various tasks throughout the day. Our principals are highly, engaged in the school day. There just isn't a lot of time. So having somebody lead that work, provide that framework for you, was big. I think you have to have a framework to go about this on your own. Typically, this isn't something you're going to do when you have 15 minutes available in your day. You have to wrap your head around it. You have to come up with a plan. And I think that's been probably the biggest thing that I would say is just having somebody provide that framework. And then we can put that into play. I mean, they're building the framework. They're giving us the guidance. They're, vetting different platforms. And then we can put those into play. And then we can gather feedback and come to collective decisions as to what is the best path moving forward. So I think it's a scary proposition to go about this alone, without guidance, without framework. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is to find that framework.
Yeah, well said. Well said. So, Cory, I end every episode with the same question, and that is, what does the term rural advantage mean to you? Well,
I've spent all of my career basically in a rural setting. So I've said this many times before. What makes rural schools special? Well, that connection, that community connection. You're the pride of the community. You're able to do things differently. You're able to understand kids on multiple different levels, not just as a student, but as a student athlete, as a performer in the arts, and getting to know what they're capable of. And so I think maximizing that opportunity is so important. And I couldn't imagine being in a different setting where I didn't know the students and I wasn't able to make changes where I had to go through various levels of bureaucracy to make meaningful change. If it's good for kids, let's do it. That's kind of my philosophy, is why wouldn't we do it? Obviously you always vet things for potential pitfalls and things like that, but you can't be afraid of making mistakes. You can't be afraid of, because it'll just tie your hands behind your back and you'll forced to walk through the day without much enjoyment. So I truly appreciate the rural advantage, and I think every rural school should really take advantage of that.
Yeah, that's very well said. Thanks for sharing that. And thank you for opening up the playbook behind the programs. I mean, your clarity around framing urgency without losing people, building that teacher confidence for real mastery learning and turning those community partners into really durable opportunities that give rural leaders a practical path forward. So I appreciate you taking some time and sharing the things that you're doing in Wisconsin with me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
So friends, if this sparked an idea, take one step this week by naming a student outcome that you'd like to move, or pick a routine that you're going to stop or start to make space for it, and invite one community partner to help you test it. If the Rural Scoop is helping you lead with purpose, please like this episode, subscribe to the show, and leave a comment with your takeaway. And share it with a colleague who also cares about rural schools, because those signals help other leaders find us, and I read all of your notes. I'm your host, Melissa Sadorf, and remember, in rural leadership, our strength is our shared story. When we lead together, we thrive together. I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Rural Scoop. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep these important rural conversations going. And we'd love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment or share your thoughts. You can follow along and never miss a new release by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform or by following us on social. We're on YouTube at The Rural Scoop, Instagram at msadorf1, and X at msadorf03. The Rural Scoop is produced with support from Vela Educational Consultants. To learn more, visit velaconsultants.com. See you next time for more great discussions about rural education. And as always, keep leaning in to the rural advantage.